Okay, so we're starting with reproduction. There are two basic types of reproduction in eukaryotes, asexual and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction requires only a single parent. There's going to be one parent involved in making this new organism, right? So single parent is either going to split off, there's going to be some budding or fragmenting, or a piece of that parent splits off and a new organism is formed. Okay, this is going to be mostly due to, that mitotic division where the organism is going to, duplicate the genetic information. So it's going to duplicate its DNA, copy what's there, and then budding or fragmentation takes place and a new organism forms basically by breaking off a piece of that parent cell. And so the new individual that is created is going to inherit the same genes, the same traits, identical to that of the parent. All right. So asexual reproduction is a very rapid process. It happens pretty efficiently. Okay. Where this organism, again, is going to duplicate its genetic material and then it's going to split off, into another organism. Now that's different than sexual reproduction. Okay. Write this down. Sexual reproduction requires the union of two sex cells, okay, and we call those gametes. So for sexual reproduction to take place, two different parents are contributing to the formation of this new individual. Okay, the gametes are going to unite. Okay, the gametes are sex cells, the sperm and egg are going to unite and create a fertilized cell that we'll call a zygote. Okay, write that term zygote down. Mute your phone, please. You're. Someone fell asleep. Hold on. Figure who that is. Where is that coming from? What in the world? I can't figure out who it is. Oh, I see it. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so sexual reproduction requires two parents, right? Both parents are going to contribute some genetic information, right? So when, in another slide or two, we'll talk about chromosomes that we talked about already, but we know that we get chromosomes from dad and chromosomes from mom. Those chromosomes are going to unite together. We're going to form that fertilized cell that we'll call a zygote, all right? Okay, so the results of these different types of reproduction, the result of asexual reproduction is that we're going to get an identical copy of the organism that we started with. Make sure you have that in your notes. Okay, we're going to call that a clone. Okay, asexual reproduction is sometimes referred to as cloning. Okay, because we're producing a genetically identical organism. And I keep using this term genetically identical. I'm referring to the DNA and the chromosomes that are present. Okay, the genes that are present. Okay, these organisms are going to be exact copies of the parent. Okay, the offsprings will be exact copies of the parent. Sexual reproduction, completely different. Okay, the results of sexual reproduction is going to be, it's going to result in genetic variation in the offsprings. Okay, so if you think about your family, right, you might have 2 or 3 siblings. You all are going to have variations in your DNA, right? That's because you get various combinations of genes or chromosomes from mom and from dad. Okay, and there's a process known as crossing over that we'll look at in just a minute, where these chromosomes are sort of randomly distributed into these new cells that are being created through meiosis. Okay, and so, but right now we're understanding that the results of reproduction, we're talking about 2 different general types of reproduction, sexual and asexual. Asexual reproduction results in individuals that are going to be identical, okay, clones of the parent. Sexual reproduction, we're going to produce offsprings that vary. They're going to have genetic variation when you compare them to the parent organisms. Okay, so the offsprings are not genetically identical to the parent from sexual reproduction. Okay, let's look at this visual I have here. On the left, we have sexual reproduction. Okay, so we have parent organisms. We have blue parent organism, we'll say that's dad. We'll have red parent organism, we'll say that's mom. Okay, so the offspring that's going to be created is going to be a mixture of both parents genetically. Okay, that's the result of sexual reproduction. In contrast, asexual reproduction is that the parent cell and the offspring that's going to be created is going to be identical to the parent cell. Okay, so if I showed you some schematics or gave you some scenarios, you should be able to, apply this information in terms of what's happening during sexual and asexual reproduction. What are the outcomes? Okay, this is just a table to compare these two processes. One of the things I want us to focus on is the pros and cons. There are pros and cons to both of these processes. Okay, sexual reproduction, in terms of pros or advantages, they produce these genetically different babies or offsprings, right? And these genetic differences are going to, in theory, provide or increase survival rates in the population, providing some kind of survival advantages. Okay, so genetic variation is a good thing. Okay, it increases your chances of survival. Okay, one of the downsides, though, to sexual reproduction is that it's very cumbersome. It requires a lot of time, a lot of effort. Okay, if you think about a human reproduction process, it takes a very long time for conception to actually take place, and then for that process of that embryo turning into a fetus and continuing to develop into a baby. That's a very long process, requires a lot of time and effort. Okay. Asexual reproduction, on the other hand, has its advantages because it happens very quickly and is thought to be a very efficient process. It's supposed to happen extremely efficiently. However, there is a drawback to that. Like, yes, it happens quickly, rapidly, very efficiently. It copies what's there, but then there's a downside to that. Particularly if there are any genetic defects or abnormalities or deficiencies in the parent, guess what? That's going to be passed down to the offspring. Okay, so that's a potential disadvantage of asexual reproduction. Okay, that again, any of the genetic problems or abnormalities or deficiencies that are found in that parent cell genetically, that's going to be passed on down to the offspring. Okay, so I do want you to be able to understand that and compare or apply and extrapolate from this information, some pros and cons of how pros and cons of asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. How many parents are required? What are the offsprings looking like? What types of organisms use each of these forms of reproduction? Okay. Humans typically use sexual reproduction. Animals and plants all use sexual reproduction. Organisms that use asexual reproduction are going to be our yeast, fungi, bacteria, binary fission. These are all examples of organisms that use asexual reproduction as a means for producing more offspring. What questions do we have about this information? Awesome. All right, so we talked about the structure of the chromosome a little bit, and I showed you some images, but the two arms of a chromosome we sometimes refer to as homologous chromosomes. Okay, these homologous chromosomes are going to be similar in size and shape and position of the centromere. And the centromere is a structure that's holding these two sister chromatids together, okay? These homologous chromosomes are going to carry information about the same genetic traits, all right? So let's make sure that we're clear, you know, fundamentally on what is a chromosome and its function, okay? Chromosomes are just our DNA, right, that's wrapped around these proteins, all right? And we get this chromosome structure. These two arms, again, let me show you another here. Let's look at this picture. These are chromosomes, okay? We have two homologous chromosomes. There's one here, and then there's another here, okay? And then these two arms are held together by a structure in the center that's known as a centromere. And so our chromosomes are important because they contain our genes, okay? Each of the chromosomes, I showed you in the lecture on Monday, the layout of that human karyotype where you saw all of our chromosomes laid out in pairs. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Each of our chromosomes exists in pairs in a normal human. And each one of those chromosomes have different genes located on them at various loci. And these genes are going to code for the different traits that we see in an individual, right? Our eye color and all of the hair color, skin color, all of those traits and characteristics are determined by genes that are found on our chromosomes. So we're clear about that. If a cell has two sets of chromosomes in it, which all of our somatic cells do, then we're going to call that cell diploid. Write down the term diploid. Diploid refers to a cell that has two complete sets of chromosomes. In humans, the diploid chromosome number is 46. We have 46 chromosomes in our somatic cells. Somatic cells are also called body cells. If a cell only has one set of chromosomes, we say that that cell is haploid, okay? Haploid, think half, okay? Half the number of chromosomes. In the human, the haploid chromosome number is 23, okay? Half of 46. You should definitely understand that. And I did make the point on Monday that chromosome number can vary depending on the organism, okay? So this number, this chromosome number 46 holds true for humans, okay? That number might be different for a dog or a cat or a fish, okay? And so visually, this is just a visual representation of what a diploid cell would look like versus a haploid cell in terms of chromosome number. This cell would be diploid because it has double the number of chromosomes than the haploid cell. All right, so let's make sure we understand that in the human, this diploid cell is going to be a somatic cell. Make sure you write that down in your notes. If it's a diploid cell, it is a somatic or a body cell. It has 46 chromosomes, double the number of the haploid cells. In the human, this haploid cell is what type of cell? If it has half the number of chromosomes. What kind of cell is that?
Sex cell.
Sex cells, absolutely. Why? Why does that make sense intuitively based on what happens during sexual reproduction? Why is this only half?
Because it takes two to make a baby.
Right, absolutely, Cameron. We're gonna need to join two sex cells together. One set from mom, one set from dad to get that total of 46. Make sure you understand that concept, guys. Thank you, Cameron. And so that's where we're going. With reproduction, we're going to require the union of two different eggs. That sperm will fuse with an egg for fertilization. So each one of those gametes will be considered haploid. Each one is contributing one set of chromosomes. Thereby, upon union, restoring that diploid number. in that fertilized egg that we call a zygote. Okay. So diploid is represented by 2N. N means however number is in the haploid. Okay, so a diploid is always going to be 2 times that. All right. So if I gave you any kind of questions or scenarios next week, you need to be able to apply this information using 2N representation for diploid and N for haploid. Haploid is going to have 1 copy of each chromosome. Diploid is going to have 2 copies of each chromosome. You need to be able to apply that next week. What questions do we have before we keep going? Great. So, meiosis. This is a reductive cell division. Meiosis means to make smaller, okay? This is going to be in contrast to what we've already explored from mitosis. Mitosis, we're going to duplicate that genetic material and create a new cell that's going to be an exact copy of what we started with. That's not the case with meiosis. Meiosis, we're actually going to reduce the chromosome numbers per cell. Okay, so meiosis is a cell division that reduces the chromosome number by 1/2. A diploid cell, okay, diploid, we're talking about 46 chromosomes, will undergo 2 rounds of cell division, resulting in 4 haploid cells. So let's look and see how that has done. Meiosis, I mentioned this process of crossing over earlier, okay? Meiosis is the process, again, how we're generating our gametes. Sex cells are being made during meiosis. Gametes are being made. And a process known as crossing over takes place. You should go out and read a little bit about what's happening during crossing over, okay? But in a nutshell, what's happening is that these chromosomes are being separated and dispersed into these daughter cells during this reproduction process, during meiosis. This is a random activity. There's no rhyme or reason for which chromosomes are going to be distributed to which daughter cells that are being made, okay? But crossing over takes place. There's 2 rounds of cell division, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, and we're going to follow those same steps that we saw in mitosis, okay? We're going to go through prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 2, and then we're going to repeat that. We're going to have another successive round of cell division for meiosis 2, and we're separating these sister chromatids, and these chromosomes or sister chromatids are going to be dispersed across 4 daughter cells in meiosis. So the events of meiosis, as I just said, are very similar to those that you saw in mitosis with 4 important differences. Please mute your mics. Okay. Let's make sure we highlight these 4 important differences between mitosis and meiosis. Write these down, okay? The first one is that meiosis requires 2 rounds of cell division. 2 rounds of cell division that's going to produce 4 daughter cells. 4 gametes will be made. Okay? Meiosis has 2 rounds of cell division. It's going to produce 4 daughter cells. However, even though there's 2 rounds of cell division, there's only 1 round of duplication of DNA, and this is how we're leading to that reduction in chromosome number per cell. The DNA is duplicated only once, okay? So you think about the events of the eukaryotic cell cycle, you have your G1, you have S phase where that DNA is duplicated. That part only happens once, but once it gets to M phase, it's gonna go through 2 rounds of that, what we saw with our mitotic division, the prophase, metaphase, anaphase. That's gonna happen twice, all right? Third difference, each of the 4 cells that are produced by meiosis contains a haploid number of chromosomes, okay? That's a distinct difference from mitosis. The offsprings that are made from mitosis are going to be diploid, okay? Meiosis produces 4 haploid cells. And then the last difference here is that each haploid cell that's created from meiosis is going to be genetically different. It's going to have a unique combination of genes. They're not going to be all the same. They're not going to have all the same, the unique. They're not going to have the same identical genetic makeup. Okay. All right, so this is just a visual here that we should be clear of when we're comparing mitosis and meiosis, okay? For mitosis, we're gonna start with a diploid cell. The events of the M phase will take place, and we end up with 2 daughter cells that are also gonna be diploid. They're gonna be exact copies of what we started with from mitosis, okay? Meiosis, on the other hand, is a reductive cell division, and it's gonna go through not 1 round of division, but 2 rounds of division. And we're going to end up with 4 cells. They're going to have a haploid number of chromosomes. Make sure you have that in your notes. Okay. So,
excuse me.
Yes, yes.
Can you explain the meiosis side?
Mm-hmm. So meiosis is very similar to mitosis, but instead of going through 1 round of reproduction where we end up with 2, it doesn't stop here. These 2 cells that are created after meiosis 1 is going to go through another round of division, and they're going to be divided again into another set of 2 and 2, and we're going to end up with a total of 4 cells being produced because there are 2 rounds of cell division in meiosis instead of 1.
Okay, thank you.
And each of these diploid cells that are created are going to be further reduced into haploid numbers. Okay, so the genetic information will be copied and duplicated in this first round, but then it'll be reduced in this second round where we end up with 4 haploid cells. So there's only 1 round of duplication of genetic material in these 2 rounds of division.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. What other questions do we have before we keep going? Okay. And so here we're recapping now. We're pretty much done. Meiosis is a form of cell division that is required to produce sperm and egg. That's the sole purpose of meiosis. Okay, is to produce these gametes. Okay, we want to produce daughter cells, and we use that term daughter cell to just refer to the new cells that are being made. So we need to produce these daughter cells that are going to have half as many chromosomes as the starting cell, because these cells are going to be used specifically for reproduction. Okay, and again, this is just me recapping what I just said. Meiosis happens across 2 phases, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. And these 2 rounds of cell division will result in the production of 4 haploid cells. Okay, and as I said before, you're going to see exactly what you saw with mitosis. So those steps, prophase, metaphase, telophase, anaphase, it's going to happen twice. Okay, with the end being 4 haploid daughter cells being created. Okay, and the advantage here again that we talked about a little bit earlier is the genetic diversity that will be the result. Okay, the exchange of genetic material, that process of crossing over that I told you about, is going to result in that random distribution of genes across our 4 different cells, and those offsprings are all going to look different. Okay, so we're going to stop here. A couple things will happen.